So, I mean, the big question then, and I think you've thought about this before, is, why now? Why Arabic, the language has been around for thousands of years, has an extremely long history. We know this, I assume, from the names of people, from citations in other scripts of Arabic, etc. But why is Arabic being written now in what becomes its own script?
A number of factors, but I think probably the main driver is the Cold War between Rome and Iran, which is becoming hot, if you like, by the 6th century. Major clashes between them. And what tends to happen, as we know ourselves during the Cold War between America and Soviet Union, is the two sides scramble to get other participants on their side. Mm-hmm. And so the Arabs are one group, one among many, is in Georgia, which also get pulled in. But the Arabs are these pastoralist groups of Arabia. They have one useful thing, which is manpower. Fighting wars, that's really what you need. So because of that, they're willing to give subsidies and titles and extra benefits to pastoralist Arabian tribes. So they become more involved within the empire, and almost inevitably by assimilation, they start to take on some of the aspects, if you like, of this civilization: literacy, patronage of literature, and so on. And the writing, I mean, the language is obviously crucial. It's Arabic, whether you exactly translate that as Arab. So, I agree with a number of writers like Peter Webb. You have to not get our sense of Arab when you watch everyone all the way across from Morocco to Iraq, or limited way. But it's nevertheless, the fact that Arabic is now gaining a higher status, language Arabic, and that's probably giving more of a sense of identity to use it.
What about the idea that the Arabic script is I don't know really what evidence you'd point to for this, but I've heard the idea that the Arabic script is a vehicle for Christian missions, on the sort of an
so that's the other, yes, if I was going to pick a second. In fact, in the first article I actually wrote about this kind of epigraphy and identity. I think I toyed with both of these. One is the political, if you like. But yes, the other is the Christian missionary argument. Just because missionary work by Christians was very much, or the idea was carried out in the vernacular. This was true of early modern Christian missionaries as well. Translate the Bible into vernacular languages. So you see at the same time languages like Coptic, Georgian being given extra boost by the fact that Christian texts are now being written in their languages. So I certainly wonder, I mean, unfortunately it's more difficult to prove this, but I certainly wonder whether Christian messages and missionaries into Arabia have, maybe whether just orally or also partially in writing, Arabic giving a boost, if you like, as not only spoken language but a language that can be used in scripture. I mean, I do actually think that some Christian texts were actually translated into Arabic. The evidence is circumstantial, really. There's two. One is that most of these I think all of these pre-Islamic Arabic inscriptions are by Christians. And the second is that the Quran is a really developed monotheist vocabulary. And I think that's because Arabic has been already used, probably by Jews as well as Christians, for theological conversations, like for maybe telling biblical stories, simple discussions, basic discussions about the nature of God. But to my mind, it presupposes it, the Quran. It bursts onto the scene with this incredibly advanced monotheist vocabulary. That must have some predecessor and background to it.
I can't help but ask whether among those texts might have been the Bible. Do you have thoughts on that? Was there an Arabic Bible before Islam?
So I certainly think certain texts, and it doesn't need to be the whole
Genesis to Revelation.
Yeah, exactly. But I would imagine the number of I mean, some might have been apocrypha, but popular stories, for example. Some of the basic works like Genesis might have been. It's hard to imagine, but as I say, in a sense, Surah 12 of the Quran, seems to presuppose that people really know biblical stories in this fair amount of detail. So, yeah, I would personally think it's very likely that these portions of the Bible are in Arabic.
Right. And you mentioned the nature of Quranic vocabulary on, well, just the way that it is sort of soaked through with biblical language. Some of the terms, at least according to most scholars, likely are borrowings, if that's the right term, from Aramaic. Sometimes people speak specifically of Syriac, which is a dialect of Aramaic, Christian dialect of Aramaic. So if we think of Salat and Zakat, these are sort of maybe a good place to start. Prayer and almsgiving, which are actually written in Arabic with a waw before the ta, with a w before the t at the end. Many would see as a sign of Aramaic origin. I don't know if you have thoughts on that. Also, maybe the word Quran itself, because of the ending of the word. Yeah, so how Arabic is the Quran? Does the question even make sense to think in those terms, or what would you say to that?
So there's two things. So Syriac is North Syria and North Mesopotamia. So to my mind, Syriac is not the most obvious, although it's true that during the 6th century it becomes more important as a kind of pan-Christian language for non-Chalcedonians. But the other thing to remember is that Aramaic, its broader category, has been used since 500 BC in the Hejaz. The Nabonidus, the Babylonian king, was there in the oasis of Tamar, and Aramaic has been used then. It's an important language at the time. So before Muhammad, you're talking about 1100 years of interaction. So and over that time, often it's put in terms of, did this word directly come from Syriac, as though it's a really, and sometimes even put the Muhammad took the words from.
Yes. Some may know the book of, sorry to interrupt, but some may know the book of Arthur Jeffrey, written maybe in India, I think in the 1930s, where he has this sort of internal conversation for each term he considers, saying, well, yeah, maybe it's from Hebrew, maybe it's from Christian Palestinian Aramaic. This guy makes an argument that it's actually from Syriac, and here's the one I'm going to choose. And he just he chooses the one
So you really have to bear in mind this huge, long period of time that the two languages have been in contact. And the thing is, it goes both ways as well. So, for example, the word used for priest in the area, kahna, doesn't look like it's actually an Aramaic borrowing. It looks like into Arabic, but actually an Arabic borrowing into Aramaic. So this is an organic relationship over a very long period of time. And I think it's part of the way we approach it, which is partly the idea that borrowing shows something negative in a way. It's a bit like approaching English by saying, aha, look, cafe, déjà vu, you've taken this word from French, not a proper language. It's like, it's it's 1,000 years of contact. Yes, of course. But it doesn't mean that it's any less, that the Quran, the language is any less Arabic. The fact that ultimately you say the derivations are from
have you
another
read,
language,
sorry,
but it doesn't mean it's not Arabic, if you like, just as my English is no less English because I got some French.
So, I want to get on. We'll just spend about 10 more minutes, and then we'll leave you in peace. But I wanted to, before we leave the question of Arabia and the Arabs and this whole question, could you address, and this will lead us up to the question of In God's Path, but your 2014 work on the conquest, but where is scholarship on the question of the notion of an Arab people before Islam? If you were an Arabic speaker in what is now Saudi Arabia or Jordan or Syria or somewhere, or Iraq, how would you have thought of yourself? Would you identify with other Arabic speakers, all Arabic speakers, only your tribe? How do you imagine that?
So I feel it's often those who dislike that idea say that, oh, but in the Quran, Arabi is a purely linguistic term. But languages are never purely linguistic. I mean, obviously we're used to the idea now with English being so international, global, that it doesn't impart that much identity. But as soon as you go for a more minority language, see Greeks together, see Latvians together, say Yoruba speakers together, it's an important factor in their identity. Arabic as a minority language of the empire would have imparted a degree of identity to my mind. I'm not saying it's the be all and end all, but it certainly would have been a factor. The problem usually comes, of course, is that some people think, and some scholars therefore react to, the idea that of making Arab a bit like the modern sense of Arab. Although, to be honest, if you press people on what does it mean to be Arab today, it is actually very, very difficult, because it's not, and they often fall back, well, speaking Arabic. So there is a degree of geography must be there as well, but then there is a physical space environment that those Arabic speakers are inhabiting that also imparted some degree of identity. So I do think there's some identity there. I just wouldn't. I agree that we should go as far as think in terms of the modern day sense of what it's the Arab, and we also shouldn't do the same as 9th century Muslim writers who tend to have an idea that being Arab was very strong and very extensive. So they try and make all the Yemenis into Arabs as well, those who are living in particular Yemen today, but who spoke and wrote Sabail, form of ancient South Arabian, and will make it really clear in their inscriptions that they're not Arab. They talk about Arabs coming down and staying in their area or being mercenaries in their army, but they are really clear that they are not Arab. So that sort of all-embracing sort of Arab, which is there in our 9th century, shouldn't be applied in the 6th century.
And what about, one last question on this topic, what about the Byzantines, for example, the Christians of the Byzantine realm who were not Arabic speakers, so Greek speakers? How did, obviously they're Byzantine provinces, which, you know, Arabia Petrea, Arabia Felix, and I'm forgetting one, Deserta, Arabia Deserta, right? So this term Arabia is there. But was there a notion beyond a geographical term of those sort of, I don't know, it's complicated because not all of the Arabic speakers were nomads. Obviously, there were city dwellers among them, but from the Byzantine perspective, was there an Arab people?
So for them, in some ways, the distinction is citizen or non-citizen.
Okay.
The Saracen are non-citizen. They're those pastoralist groups.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Are on the edges and within, to some extent, bits of the empire, but they are not them. They are uncivilized people as far as they're concerned, and they're not citizens of the Roman Empire. Therefore, you don't really trust them in the same way. There is a term Arab by this time, and it's the people who inhabit Arabia. When you're mentioning Petrea and that's earlier, but since the annexation of the Nabatean kingdom, 105 AD, got this Provincia Arabia, the province of Arabia, and often called the Provincia Araborum, the province of the Arabs. So Arabs, from certainly the Roman perspective inside the empire, Arabs are those people who are part of the province. It's interesting though, so I've been publishing a number of Arabic papyri recently from Messana, which is southern Israel, and very early, so from the earliest texts, it used to be thought there were only Greek ones. I discovered that a number of Arabic ones, which had been somehow mislaid, there are purely Arabic ones. They're already there from 56 Hijra. And it's interesting that Arabic Northern develops. Presumably they're Arabic speakers and have been Arabic speakers for a while. People don't just suddenly start. But what it meant to them exactly, I'd imagine first and foremost they saw themselves as Roman citizens. A couple of the legal texts refer to the fact that this is being performed, this contract or whatever being carried out according to the Roman way. Ethos Romaicos. So, but presumably being Arabic speakers meant something to them, but it's not easy to get into that, unfortunately. Some of the Arabic sources distinguish between and the Ahl al-Balad. The Ahl al-Balad seem to imply locals somewhere. Who might have been Arabic speakers. I'm sure it's some factor in promoting some common core for those Christians, Arabic speakers who joined the Arabs. Arabic must have played a part there. But identity is a bit of a nightmare to pin down, even in the modern age, when we have very minimal source material.
Yes, yes.